Welcome to the Learn Medical Spanish podcast and YouTube channel. In this episode, I'm going to be going over some anatomy terms. So this is kind of an overview of anatomy from the perspective of if you were doing kind of a head-to-toe physical exam. And so that's why I said trauma focus, kind of like what you would do during a trauma exam where you kind of check everything. So we're going to do kind of bigger anatomical structures. We're not going to get into all the fine details. We'll do that in some future episodes. So let's go ahead and get started in just a second. Quick reminder, I go over a lot of anatomy terms like this, as well as some other dialogues and things in the CME course, Essentially M Spanish. So if you're interested in that, there's a link in the episode description. So as we go through these anatomical terms, and this is part one, so I'm going to kind of go over the first half of the body, but I'll say them in English, and then I'll say them in Spanish. And then I will pause and let you repeat each one after me a couple times. All right, so I'll say them in Spanish twice and let you repeat them twice. So let's go ahead and get started. So we'll start with the head. So the very first phrase is, or word, is head. So how do you say head in Spanish? La cabeza. La cabeza. So as we go through, I'll include the definite article, or in other words, the word the, before each term, because in Spanish, you very often use the definite article with the words. You say the head instead of just head. Or if you're saying your head, in Spanish, you'd usually say the head. So it's just good to know how to say the head, the brain, the whatever. And so I will include that as we go along. So the next word is brain. So think about how to say the brain. El cerebro. El cerebro. Skull, or the skull. El cráneo. El cráneo. So of course you notice that sounds like cranium. So there are a lot of cognates like that, words that sound kind of similar, or maybe they sound similar to a synonym of the word you're trying to say oftentimes. Next word, face. La cara. La cara. Hair, or the hair. El pelo. El pelo. Ear, as in the external ear, the part you can see from the outside. La oreja. La oreja. Next is the ear, but meaning the internal ear or the functional part of the ear that allows you to hear or control your balance, etc. El oído. El oído. Next, eye, as in just one eye. El ojo. El ojo. And then just for a fun little change, what if you wanted to say both eyes? The eyes, plural. Los ojos. Los ojos. So that's another good thing to practice, is saying things singular and plural, especially with something like eyes where it'd be really common to use the plural version. Next, nose. La nariz. La nariz. Mouth, or the mouth, as always. La boca. La boca. Jaw. Hint, it sounds like mandible. Jaw. La mandíbula. La mandíbula. Teeth. Los dientes. Los dientes. So just like we did eyes and eye, singular and plural, you could make this singular, of course, if you just wanted to talk about one tooth or something. So how would you say the tooth, singular? El diente. El diente. Next, chest. El pecho. El pecho. Just in case you're not aware, that word can also be used to refer to breasts. If you say los pechos, it would mean the breasts. And there are some other ways to say that as well, but just in case you ever hear it in that context. But if you're ever asking, for example, do you have pain or pressure in your chest, they would understand if you say siente dolor o presión en su pecho. They'll understand it as the chest in general. Unless you point at one of the breasts and try to make it really clear what you're talking about or something. Anyway, the next word is ribs. Las costillas. Las costillas. Abdomen. El abdomen. El abdomen. Just like in English, there are other ways to say that, such as stomach. Stomach can refer to the whole abdomen. So you could say el estómago, for example. Neck. El cuello. El cuello. Back, as in the back in general. La espalda. La espalda. What about the lower back in particular? There's a word that's often used for this, even though it means something else as well. So low back. How would you say the low back? La cintura. La cintura. So what else does cintura mean? It means waist. So the waist, the low back, as you can kind of imagine, they're basically in the same place, at least on the posterior part of the body. So sometimes they say the cintura and kind of point to their low back when they're having low back pain or something. Next, spine. La columna. La columna. So obviously that's talking about the vertebral column. So you could say la columna vertebral as well. I believe that's the way to say that. But if you just say la columna, then they would typically understand. Arm. El brazo. El brazo. Shoulder. El hombro. El hombro. Elbow. El codo. El codo. Quick pronunciation tip. If you just look at that like an English speaker, you'd probably say codo, codo. But the D in Spanish does not sound like an English D. It's much softer. In fact, it's more similar to a TH sound. So you say kind of like codo, codo, codo instead of codo. And then you'll sound a lot more like a native speaker. So that was actually the last word for this part 1 of this anatomy overview. And so if you want to see a list of phrases on my website, you can find the link in the episode description or the video description. You can also find the podcast or YouTube version if you want to see the different version than the one that you're currently listening to, and a link to my CME course as well. So stay tuned for the next episode, which will cover part 2 of this anatomy overview. So we'll pick up where we left off. So the last term was elbow, so we'll go to the wrist and the hand, and then we'll do the lower extremity and stuff like that.